If your watercolor paper keeps warping and buckling and you're looking for an easy solution, then today's video is for you. When you work the way that I do with lots of water or lots of layers, tape only goes so far, especially when you're working with a large background. I've tried other methods for stretching watercolor paper in the past, and the process was less than ideal. Recently, I tried using foam core board, so something like a guitar board or an art board made specifically for stretching watercolor paper, and I was super impressed with the results. I used this stretching method for my recent tutorial on these watercolor hydrangeas. There was a lot of layering and detail that went into these, and the results of this stretching method did not disappoint. I'll demonstrate how to stretch your paper step by step so that you can use it in your next painting. My name is Jessica, and I'm so glad to have you here. Let's go ahead and get started. Now this is the label from the foam core board that I purchased. Guitar board is one of the most popular boards, but I couldn't access it right away in Canada. So I got this one and it works really well. And you'll see I did get the 16 by 24 size and I cut it in half so that I have two boards because I'm mostly working in sizes like 8 by 10 or just a little larger or smaller than that. And then you do want it to be moisture proof. This is specific to stretching watercolor paper. You don't want to use a foam core board with like a paper finish because it will go soggy and it won't work. The board that I'm using today has foam in the center, as you can see here. And this is a waterproof surface. It kind of feels like paper, but it resists the water. Someone tells me you can even soak these in a bathtub and they will not get damaged. So super strong and durable. But guitar board is an equivalent, and this is actually only a 1/2 inch thick. If you're working on larger sizes, I have heard some people say you want something a little thicker, like the guitar board is more like 3/4 of an inch thick. This is just a 1/2 inch thick, just so you know. But this did work really well for what I'm using it for. All right, so I have the other supplies here. This is a piece of Arches or Arch 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. I've gone ahead with my pencil and I used my ruler to kind of mark out so that I have an 8 by 10 area for the painting. And then I'm giving myself like maybe 3/4 of an inch around. You can even use like smaller than that. Even 1/2 inch is probably sufficient to have as a border. And if you want your painting to just be that little bit bigger than an 8 by 10 so that you can paint over the edges, you can decide that based on what you're painting and how you're planning to frame it. Now you may want masking tape if you like to tape the edges of your painting just so you have a clean border. That's totally up to you, but you could do that or you can paint over the edges, whatever you prefer. So the pencil is just for marking things out. And then I have a stapler. You want something that opens up so that you can put the staples in like this. So you want something that will open. Not every stapler necessarily does that, but you do want something that will open up for you. But otherwise, this is just a regular standard size stapler, which is nice. You don't need a staple gun for this. And then you're going to need a container or a tub for soaking your watercolor paper. We're going to be putting 1 inch or 2 of water in here, and you just need something large enough that your watercolor paper is going to fit inside. So I'm going to bring in this Rubbermaid container that I have here. You could use a sink or a tub. You just want whatever you're using to be quite clean. You don't want any oils getting on your paper. And I'm just going to go ahead and place my watercolor paper into the water and make sure it's definitely good and wet on both sides. And then I'm going to just let it sit there for 5 to 10 minutes. And I'll move this out of the way. And while it soaks, I'm going to show you how I'm going to be applying the staples. So now I'm going to talk about how I'm going to use my staples to staple this to the guitar board. And there's a certain order that I like to follow. So I'm going to show you that just as a quick demonstration on this paper. And then we'll do it on our actual guitar board with our watercolor paper. So we're just pretending here that I'm going to draw a rectangle if I can. That's supposed to represent our watercolor paper here. So try and kind of more or less draw it looking like a rectangle. It's not perfect, but actually, why don't we go ahead and make it kind of like so. We'll make it like this is where the border is on the paper. So this will be this larger rectangle here. This is going to be the actual watercolor paper here. And this is the little 8 by 10 section that I showed you where the painting's going to be. So we'll just go something like so. Okay. So we're going to be stapling within this border here. So staple number 1 is going to go here. So I'm going to do a little 1. Staple number 2 will come opposite side. Staple number 3 will come up top. And then staple number 4 will be down here. Then we're going to go ahead and put some more staples in, and we're going to go here first. We're going to go to the number 1, and we're going to go A, basically staple till we come up to that top edge. Then we're going to go to number 2, but we're going to go this direction, A, until we come to the bottom of the page. Then we'll go to our 3, do the same thing. Staple all the way like so, and then the same thing with our number 4. Okay, now we got to fill in these remaining spots. So we're going to go back to number 1 and do B, B, B. All right, then we're going to go do the same thing with 2 and 3. And the exact number of staples is going to depend on the size of your painting, of course. And then finally 4. And we're just going to come up to the end of that. So if you would like to go ahead and screenshot my little sample here so you can refer to it as you're applying your staples, you can. But now I'm going to go ahead and show you this on the watercolor paper and the foam core board. All right, so now I've got my foam core board here. You can see I've already played with it with the staples. Then I'm going to pick up my paper that's been soaking. So it's been over 5 minutes now. Okay, so you can shake off the excess water on your paper and then lay it down on your foam core. Now you'll notice I'm going to staple mine more to one side of the board. You could go ahead and staple it right in the center. I found for recording purposes for these videos, I like having space to put my palette right next to me, or maybe you want to have your hand on the same level surface as the painting, so you can decide where you want to lay things out on your board. I initially thought center, and then I discovered it was actually great to just put it a little to the side. So I'm going to do that. Then we're going to go ahead and staple it in the order that I showed you. So we're going to go ahead and do staple 1. And then come over and do staple 2. And I'm going to give the paper just a very, very gentle little tug before I do this. I don't know that I've seen people stretch the paper without tugging. It's just a little habit I have from my old way of doing things where I used to staple onto wooden stretcher bars. And so that's just a little carryover habit. I don't know that you have to actually give that little tug to your paper. Then I'm going to come to the top, give it a little tug again. And then put the staple in the center here. And I might end up turning my board around as I do this so that I'm not stretching across here for you guys. Just do this 4th one, and then we're going to go and start doing the rest of our staples. So there we go. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to do the A's over here. So I'm just going to pull this over a little ways. Okay, one of those staples is getting a little close to the painting there. It'll still be fine. Then I'll slide like to this side now, and we're gonna do the same thing. So this is staple 2, and we're doing our little A's coming down to the corner. And I'll speed up the video a little bit as I move through the stapling process. Okay, now I'm gonna come over here, staple these down. Then we'll move down to this lower corner here. And then we'll do our last staples, which are the B's. I feel like I might be a bit staple happy, but that's okay. I'm going to give this side just a slight little tug and then staple it down as well. Finally, I'm coming to this lower last corner. And then I'm going to let this air dry. And then it's totally optional if you want to put tape to give yourself a nice clean border. Otherwise, you can just let it dry. And when it's dry, you'll be able to start painting. Now, if you happen to like doing wet on wet techniques at the very beginning and you're planning to do like a really abstract background and you don't need any areas of your painting dry, there's no reason you couldn't start to apply a bit of paint at this point. But otherwise, you want your surface dry before you go and transfer your image. So I'm going to let this air dry now. Then when it's dry, you can go ahead and use your tape. This is just cheap masking tape from the dollar store, but if you want a nice clean line, you can always put it right against your like 8x10 outline, or if you want to give yourself a little bit more space to kind of paint over the line, you can do that. However you want to do your taping, you can. And that is one nice thing about having a little bit more border on the paper, is that you will have room for your tape to sit on there, and then you can always just trim that excess off after, or just tape it down to your board. And finally, I'll just put my last strip on. And there you have your stretched paper with nice clean edges, and you're ready to start painting. If you're ready to learn how to build layers of complex color and intricate detail in your watercolor work, I'd love to invite you to check out my new 12-part hydrangea tutorial. This is a longer, more in-depth project, but I guide you every step of the way so you're never left guessing what comes next. Together, we work through this complex subject one shape at a time, building confidence through repetition and clear structure, even as the painting becomes more detailed. Along the way, I also show you how to recover from mistakes, make adjustments, and think through each stage of the process. Because this is a pre-recorded tutorial, you can work at your own pace, rewatch any section as often as you like, and paint whenever and wherever it works best for you. You'll also have long-term access to the lessons, plus email access to me if you've joined my free newsletter, so you can ask questions or get feedback on your work. This isn't a quick project, but it's a thoughtful and rewarding one. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, you can find more information in my Etsy shop linked in the description below. Now let's get back to today's video. Then once you're happy with your final painting, you can remove the tape. And then I just have a simple flat butter knife that I'm going to use to kind of just gently put under here, lift the staples. This almost just peels right off. But I'm going to just very carefully go under the staples to make it a little easier. And then depending how you're planning to frame this, you could either just trim your staples off or just go ahead and gently pick each one out. And again, sometimes this butter knife, it's blunt. It doesn't have a sharp tip, but it does allow me to kind of get the tip of the knife under there and lift the staple out, or any other way that you like to remove staples, you can do that. I often do use this butter knife just because it works perfectly well for me. So you can see here, I decided to go ahead and trim mine down with scissors. And the final result is a beautiful piece that's ready to frame. I hope this method for stretching watercolor paper has been helpful for you and that you're inspired to try this on your next painting. In the meantime, I hope this video has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye.